Motivation didn't leave you. It was taken from you. There was a time when starting felt natural. You moved before you needed permission. Curiosity led, effort followed, and doubt came later. You didn't ask if it made sense. You asked if it felt alive. That was enough. Back then, you didn't need discipline to begin. Beginning was the default. You tried, adjusted, tried again. You learned by moving, not by explaining. And when something didn't work, you didn't call it failure. You called it information. At some point, that changed. Not suddenly, not dramatically. Quietly, you were corrected, compared, evaluated. Your enthusiasm became excessive. Your ideas became unrealistic. Your questions became inconvenient. And slowly, without anyone announcing it, you learned a new rule. Being yourself required approval, so you started checking first. You looked around before moving. You waited for signals. You asked if it was allowed, acceptable, appropriate. You replaced curiosity with caution. You replaced momentum with analysis. That's when motivation began to disappear. Not because you became lazy, not because you lost ambition, but because the cost of starting increased. Every move now came with the risk of judgment. Every attempt carried the possibility of embarrassment. Every expression required justification, so you learned to hesitate. Hesitation looks reasonable from the outside. It sounds like patience. It feels like preparation. It presents itself as responsibility. But inside, hesitation is friction. It interrupts the natural flow between desire and action. You feel it when ideas excite you, then stall. When plans energize you, then drain. When beginnings feel heavy before they even start. This is not a motivation problem. It is an authorization problem. Achisomi point you internalize the silent audience. You imagine eyes watching. You hear opinions forming. You anticipate reactions that may never happen. And instead of moving, you manage perception. You begin to choose actions that are defensible, not meaningful. You choose paths that can be explained, not felt. You ask yourself how it will look, not how it will live inside you. That shift is subtle, but it's devastating. Because creativity needs permission. Growth needs allowance. Movement needs the freedom to be clumsy, wrong, unfinished. When permission becomes a requirement, movement slows. When approval becomes necessary, desire weakens. When safety becomes the priority, motivation withers. You don't stop wanting. You stop trusting the want, and so you wait for the right time. For more clarity, for better confidence, for external validation, you wait for permission that never comes. Motivation didn't disappear. It was conditioned out of you. It was trained to associate movement with risk, expression with exposure, beginnings with consequences. And now, every time you feel the urge to start, something else shows up first. A pause, a doubt, a reason to delay. Not because you can't begin, because you were taught not to. That lesson settles deep. It hides in tone, posture, timing, and silence. You learn to lower your voice before speaking. You soften statements into questions. You apologize before you act. You seek reassurance instead of momentum. Over time, this becomes invisible even to you. You tell yourself you need motivation, but motivation is not the missing piece. Permission is permission to try without proving. Permission to move without explaining. Permission to begin without knowing where it ends. Until that permission is reclaimed, effort feels forced. Discipline feels heavy. Inspiration arrives and leaves untouched. You wait for a feeling that cannot survive scrutiny. This is how capable people stall, not from lack of ability, but from too much self, not from absence of desire, but from constant self-correction. And the longer it lasts, the harder it is to remember that movement once felt natural, simple, and free. That memory matters because it proves nothing is broken. What changed was the environment around your impulses. They were managed, measured, and moderated. Reclaiming permission does not require confidence first. It requires honesty, the willingness to begin while unsure, to move while observed, to act without applause. That is where motivation waits, quietly, for you to stop asking. It is closer than you think, intact beneath caution, ready when you decide movement matters more than permission ever did in this moment alone right now. Once permission is removed, something subtle happens to your relationship with effort. Effort stops feeling like movement and starts feeling like resistance. You don't feel pulled forward anymore. You feel pushed, and when effort feels forced, you begin to confuse friction with incapacity. You start saying things like, I am inconsistent, or I never finish what I start. But that diagnosis misses the real issue. You are not inconsistent. You are cautious. You are not undisciplined. You are monitored. You are not incapable of follow-through. You are constantly negotiating whether you're allowed to proceed. This negotiation happens quietly. It shows up as endless preparation, as the need to be ready before you begin. You tell yourself you'll start once conditions are better, once you feel more confident, once you have more clarity, once someone confirms it makes sense. But clarity rarely comes before movement. It comes from movement. When permission was intact, you didn't wait to understand everything. You explored. You adjusted. You learned by doing. Now, without permission, learning feels dangerous. Mistakes feel public. Missteps feel permanent. So you delay. Delay becomes a habit, and habits shape identity. After enough delay, you start believing you are the kind of person who doesn't act, who doesn't finish, who loses momentum. That belief becomes self-reinforcing. You watch yourself hesitate and conclude that something is wrong with you. Nothing is wrong with you. You are responding exactly as someone would who learned that action requires approval. You learned to look outward before moving inward. You learned to read the room before trusting the impulse. You learned that expression comes with consequences. So you manage yourself. You manage tone. You manage timing. You manage ambition. You manage expectations. And management kills spontaneity. It drains energy before it can become motion. This is why motivation techniques rarely work. You don't need hype. You don't need pressure. You don't need better habits. You need to remove the invisible gate you keep waiting in front of. Because every time you wait for permission, you reinforce the idea that you cannot trust yourself. And self-trust is the real fuel behind motivation. Without self-trust, even strong desires feel unsafe. Even good ideas feel risky. Even meaningful paths feel irresponsible. So you shrink them. You make them smaller. You make them more acceptable. Until they no longer excite you. Then you wonder where your drive went. It didn't go anywhere. It was constrained. People often mistake this state for burnout. But burnout comes from too much output. This comes from suppressed output. From energy that never gets to move. From impulses that never get expressed. Suppressed energy doesn't disappear. It turns inward. It becomes frustration, restlessness, self-criticism, you feel busy but unfulfilled, tired but underused. And because you don't see a clear external cause, you assume the problem is internal. You assume you lack something: motivation, discipline, confidence. In reality, you lack permission. Permission to be inefficient. Permission to be seen trying. Permission to move without a guarantee of success. Permission to begin before you're ready. This is why starting feels heavier than continuing. Starting requires crossing the permission barrier. Once you move in, momentum returns naturally. But that first step feels impossible because it asks you to violate a rule you learned long ago. The rule says, don't act unless you're sure. Don't move unless it's approved. Don't begin unless you can justify it. Breaking that rule feels wrong, even when it's right. And so you wait. You optimize. You prepare. You postpone. Not because you don't care, but because you care too much about being allowed. Motivation is not something you need to manufacture. It's something that reappears when permission is no longer required. It lives on the other side of self-approval. And until that boundary is crossed, nothing you try will feel sustainable, no matter how capable you are inside. At Chisomi point, the most important question stops being what you want to do. It becomes whether you believe you are allowed to want it. Because desire without permission turns into frustration, and frustration, over time, feels like emptiness. You may think the problem is confidence, or discipline, or motivation, but none of those come first. Permission does. Without it, every step feels heavy. Every start feels suspicious. Every impulse feels like something you should justify, soften, or delay. This is why so many capable people feel stuck. They are not blocked by lack of talent or intelligence. They are blocked by an internal authority they never chose. A voice that asks for reasons before allowing movement. A filter that checks safety before truth. That voice sounds reasonable. It rarely shouts. It asks questions. It wants proof. It wants certainty. And while you answer it, life waits. You tell yourself you will act once things feel clearer, once fear goes away, once the conditions are right. But clarity is not a prerequisite for movement. It is a result of movement. Fear does not disappear before you act. It dissolves while you act. Permission is not something you receive. It is something you take, quietly, internally, without announcement. It begins the moment you stop asking if you're allowed to start and start noticing how much energy is spent waiting. It begins when you let yourself move while uncertain, when you act without rehearsing how it will be perceived, when you choose honesty over approval. This does not require confidence. Confidence grows later. This does not require certainty. Certainty follows action. What it requires is a willingness to tolerate discomfort without retreating into explanation. You will feel exposed. You will feel inefficient. You will feel unprepared. That is not a sign you are doing it wrong. It is a sign you are no longer hiding. Motivation returns when movement is no longer conditional. When action does not need permission. When you stop managing yourself and start expressing yourself again. You were not meant to live under constant supervision. You were not designed to negotiate every impulse. That instinct to move, to create, to try did not disappear. It adapted to survive, and it is still there, waiting. The question is not how to get motivated. The question is whether you are willing to stop asking for permission to be who you already are.